Hello and welcome to today's demo. My name is Hannah and I am the Director of Customer Success here at BigMarker. And what you're seeing on the screen now is an example of the BigMarker channel. Now your channel is going to be either your company or your organization's kind of overarching account for all of the webinar hosting activities that you do on BigMarker. Now I'm showing off an example of one of my channels on BigMarker, and as you can see here, I'm hosting the same kind of session over and over again. But really, this is just an example of the type of content that you can essentially archive out on your channel. So you'll see all of your recordings are listed out, all of your upcoming webinars. Really, at its core, your channel is a storage space for all of your webinar hosting activity that you do on BigMarker. Now, you will notice here on the right-hand side of the page that we have a channel hosts section. And channel hosts are people on your team or who you would like to essentially grant admin access of the channel to. So you'll see myself is on here, and then anyone else that I want to include to be able to set up and create webinars on my account, I can add as hosts. And 2 host licenses come for free with my subscription. And if I need to add any more additional host licenses, they're $19 a month per host additionally. So again, the channel really is the macro view of your account. Now, you do have this webinar section that's at the forefront. If you do want to utilize the channel's subscriber section, discussion sections, or calendar features as kind of a secondary purpose for your channel, you certainly can, but it is not required. Again, at its core, your channel really is a storage space for your content. Now again, the channel really is the macro view of your account. On the micro level, you have your individual webinars. And no matter the type of webinar that you're hosting on BigMarker, they all start in the same place. So to schedule a webinar on BigMarker, it's really quite simple. All you have to do is click the green schedule button that's listed pretty much anywhere on the site in the top right-hand corner of your screen. And when you click it, it's going to bring you to a new page that's going to, again, any type of webinar that you host will kind of start the same place. So all you have to do is give it a title, choose your webinar format, and here's kind of where it gets a little interesting. It does default to the live webinar format, which is just your standard run-of-the-mill webinar. It's a live webinar format. You can record in this section. Obviously, it's kind of when people think webinars, your typical webinar format. But we do have 3 other options as well. The first being an on-demand webinar. And an on-demand webinar is a pre-recorded video that you are uploading to a landing page on BigMarker that can be viewed at any time. Now, you can always capture registrations on your on-demand webinars. You can also monetize your on-demand webinars. If you want to set up ticket prices, you can certainly do this, but it is a passive viewing experience. It's almost like viewing almost like a YouTube video or a Vimeo video, and it's just going to be a video on a landing page. The third option is an automated webinar on BigMarker, and this is going to essentially put your entire webinar on autopilot. You can schedule chats to send, you can schedule videos to play, any polls you want to trigger or pop-up offers, really anything that you would share during a live webinar, you can pre-populate it in the automated webinar, and you don't even have to be in the webinar room. But of course, if you'd like to, you certainly can. And the fourth option is our 24/7 webinar. Now this is very similar to the live webinar format, except the 24/7 webinar format allows you to always have the same webinar link for the same webinar, and it's always going to be open and available to enter. The only difference here is that you cannot record in the 24/7 webinars, so if you are planning to record your webinars, you'll just want to make sure to use the live webinar or the automated webinar formats. Now, moving on to actually scheduling out your webinar, the next step is deciding if you want to offer your webinar once or offer it as a recurring webinar where you schedule at multiple different times for the same webinar. Then you simply schedule the date and time, duration, and from there, you just fill out a few more basic details such as the privacy and the about section of the webinar, which can certainly always be changed at a later time after you schedule your session. So once you click this green schedule button here at the bottom, you're going to create a webinar landing page that looks pretty similar to the one that I have here. Now this is an example of a webinar that I have coming up tomorrow, and this webinar, as you can see, is in registration state here. So one thing to note about the landing page of your webinar is that this is the place where people come to register for your webinar before it goes live. It's also where people come to enter the webinar when it is live. And if you choose to publish your recording will also publish to this landing page as well. So the link doesn't change throughout the entire life cycle of the webinar and can be accessed at any time using that same link. So again, just to kind of give you a layout of this page, and this is one of our many templates, which I'll get to in just a moment here. But you'll see that you can provide an about section, agenda topic points, really key details about your webinar, of course, any featured presenter details, and then of course your channel as well as the host of the webinar. So let's kind of dig into how to essentially customize this landing page. You'll see in the top right hand corner of your screen that you have 3 buttons. The primary button is the edit page button. And if I zoom out here and click this, you'll notice that I can do live editing on this landing page. So I can change my banner image here. I can adjust the button color. I can go ahead and adjust my about section or agenda topics at any time. But you'll notice that this page this section is rather brief. For more kind of in-depth editing, you want to actually draw your attention now to this 2 secondary buttons at the top of the screen. The first being Change Template. Now, when you create your webinar for the first time, you'll get to this page first, but really, if you want to change your webinar layout or your template at any time, just click that Change Template button, and you have 11 different really cool looking templates that you can choose for your webinar page. Let's just kind of check out an example of one. I'm going to preview this. And you'll see that the actual layout in terms of how the images display, you'll see in this section you have a very large countdown clock, and also how the information about the webinar is also displayed. So this one only contains, an about section and featured presenters in addition to the banner image here at the top. So you'll want to be able to kind of go through and pick the template design that works best for you along with the images that you prefer. And it's going to make your landing page look really, really nice and professional. Now, getting back to the landing page of the webinar, that third and final button here at the top is the Manage Webinar button. And this is really going to be all of your true editing tools, or really what I like to call it as the back end of your webinar that you have access to as an admin. So this section is really broken down into 6 major parts. The first part being the Edit tab, which allows you to do all of the true editing features that you'd like to modify for all of your webinar details and things about your webinar. So in the Webinar Details section, you'll notice that you can do things like, adjust your webinar title, change the date and time, again, add another About section or agenda topics. So all of your kind of true editing tools. But on this left-hand side, you'll also notice that there's a lot of other edits that you can make to your webinar, such as adding guest presenters. Now, as I mentioned earlier, guest presenters and webinar hosts, or channel hosts, are going to be a little bit different. Channel hosts are people who can set up and create webinars, but with guest presenters, you can add as many as you like for free. So to add a guest presenter to your webinar, all you have to do is click Add New Presenter. And then from here, you can fill out any of the details that you would like to, add a photo, any bio, name, title. But the important part here is adding a contact field, because this email that you send it to is going to trigger a presenter invite email. And with that, it's going to contain a personalized login link. So when that presenter clicks the link, it's going to automatically log them into their quote unquote presenter account so that they enter the webinar with presenter credentials. This is a really important step. So just make sure that when you are adding your presenter, you make sure to add the correct email address. And then of course, in this section as well, you can dictate what permissions this presenter will have. So do you want them to be displayed on the landing page? Do you want them to have admin controls in the webinar room? You have all of these things that you'll definitely want to check off in terms of permissions and save your changes when you're ready to go. So the next couple sections are also going to be, around the editing features such as selling tickets. If you do want to monetize your webinars, you certainly can set up ticket sales, by clicking paid tickets here and setting your price to attend the live event, and then also the price to view the recording as well. There is also a coupon code here. If you'd want to share a 5-digit code for certain people to be able to attend for free, you can certainly set that up there as well. And then finally in this section, I just like to cover the privacy settings. So when you set up your webinar, you can decide if you want your webinar to be public, which means that it's searchable on BigMarker and also on search engines like Google. or private, which means that it's not listed publicly on BigMarker, it's not searchable on BigMarker, and of course not on search engines either. But the default setting here is that anyone with the link can attend your webinar if it's a private webinar. If you want to modify your privacy settings, you can choose one of our other privacy settings, such as only those with a password can attend, to even further protect your webinar. And then also on the bottom here, you'll notice that we have the recording permissions as well. So if you choose to publish your recording on BigMarker, you can decide who can view it, with the default setting being anyone with the webinar link. But you can certainly modify that to, for example, only those who attended the live webinar, or only those who registered, or something like that, to also further protect your recording. So we've covered a lot of the kind of editing tools here. Let's kind of draw our attention now to the design section. Now, the design section really is kind of a continuation of the landing page template kind of design stuff that we covered earlier. So it's really just further design elements to your webinar. So again, you can change your template also from this section. But also, you can do things like add a logo to your live webinar. If you don't want the BigMarker B in the top left-hand corner of your live webinar room, you can, of course, adjust this to add your own logo by clicking the Change Logo button here. You can also add a theme color as well, so that, adjusting the actual banner color of your live webinar. We have a few stock colors available to you, but you can also add your company hex color here by clicking the plus sign. And finally, you can save that as a default, so each webinar that you host will have the same theme for your live webinars. The final piece to this section is the webinar preview card. Now, this is the image that will actually display on your channel. So if you are wanting to actually build up a subscriber list to your channel and have people actually visiting your channel, you're going to want to make it look really nice. So you can actually, for each webinar that you host, make a unique preview card image that will display on your channel. So again, like I mentioned, this section is rather brief. Getting into more of like the marketing and management side of your webinar, let's draw our attention now to the emails and invitations section of the webinar. So this is the section where, of course, you can send and set up really nice customized invitations, but then also all of your reminders and notification emails can be managed from here as well. So let's just kind of cover this really briefly. The first part here is setting up an invitation. So if you want to send an invitation to an email list that you have, all you have to do is click New Invitation. And then from there, you'll be able to add your email list. And then from there, you'll be able to adjust the content and the design of the email. And then you can send it or schedule it to send at a later date. So also in the emails and invitations section, you have the ability to customize the notification emails that are sent. So you'll notice just below the invitation section, you have 3 emails that registrants will receive leading up to your webinar. And these can certainly be modified. You can edit them. You can turn some of them off. You can add more. To add more, you just click on the Add New Emails here at the top. But really what these emails are important for is that they also contain a personalized login link that your registrants, so people who are going to attend your webinar, will receive. So a confirmation email and 2 reminder emails, a 24-hour and a 30-minute reminder, will be sent out. And each of these will contain that personalized login link that will make it really easy for these people to get into your webinar. All they have to do is click it, and it's going to auto log them in, quote unquote, into their BigMarker account. And then from there, it's just a one-click entry into the webinar. Also, in this section, we have things like your recording publish notification, webinar feedback survey that's going to go out after your webinar, and then any general emails that you want to send from BigMarker, you can add and set up here. So if you wanted to send like an offer email or something like that, you can certainly send that from BigMarker as well. And again, all of the emails in this section can be edited. You can turn them on or off. You can delete some. You can add more. It's really your prerogative. But these are the emails that we have auto set up. So if you just want to use them as is, then they're ready to go. So getting back to this kind of top section here, the Manage Webinar section is next. And this is what I like to call your home base as a admin of your webinar, because this Manage Webinar dashboard that we're on right now is actually where you land every time you visit your webinar as an admin. So this section is really important. And let's kind of break down the dashboard really quickly. your dashboard, you'll see a few things. So you have this webinar URL. This is just your generic shareable link that you can copy and share wherever you like. So if you want to share your link on social media or in a blog post or newsletter, wherever you're sharing it, you just copy it. And this is a link to your webinar. Again, regardless of any stage in the webinar's life cycle, you can send people to your landing page using this link. Now, beyond that, you'll see a lot of really interesting information as well, such as all of the analytics around your webinar. Now, you'll get these in an automated report following your webinar, but if you want to check out at any time any registration information, so if people are clicking or registering from your invitation emails that you've sent from BigMarker, or let's say post-webinar analytics, you want to see, who registered versus who attended, the actual show-up rate, also information like the session length and average time spent in the room. But we also get a lot of really interesting data on engagement in your webinar, which is really, really important to certain, hosts depending on what you're doing. So here's just kind of a quick breakdown of what you'll get on a per attendee basis, and then also on a total attendee basis for your webinar. You'll see, who is attending, how long they were in the webinar for. So let's say Jane Doe was in your webinar for 40 minutes. But the engage time is actually going to show how long they're on the tab of your webinar for. So even if they're in the webinar room, but they might be off clicking on Facebook or checking email or something like that, and they're not totally engaged, that's going to eat away at their total engage time. So if Jane Doe is, like I said, in the webinar room for 40 minutes, but only engaged for 20 minutes, that means that, she was only kind of present or engaged for 50% of the time. Now, you'll also notice that we collect chats, Q&As, and polls that were hosted during the webinar. So you'll get those in a downloadable transcript. You can view those at any time after the webinar, and you'll see those on a per attendee basis as well. So you'll get on a per attendee basis, who's chatting, if they asked any questions in the Q&A section, if they answered any poll questions, etc. And then finally in this dashboard at the very bottom, you'll see the embed section. Now you can embed a registration widget onto your own website, and you can also embed your live webinar. You can also actually embed your recorded webinar as well, and that will show up after your webinar has been hosted. But a registration widget will kind of look like this. You can decide if you want it to be, a big image. You can change really to a form only if that suits your fancy, and you can customize it to your liking, and then just take this embed code and plug it into your website. Now the embed your live webinar will work exactly the same. It's just an iframe code into your website. But now we found ourselves at the top of the webinar pages, the manage webinar section as well. The only other thing that I really like to note in this section, just because I think it's a best practice, is that even if you're hosting live webinars and you want to kind of prepare yourself, you can preload all of your content after you schedule the webinar anytime before the webinar room opens. So that means that any pop-up offers that you want to share during your webinar, any slideshows or videos such as YouTube or MP4 videos, any handouts and polls can all be preloaded into your webinar so that when you enter the live webinar, it's going to be ready and available for you to open at your leisure. So this is, again, best practice. I always recommend preloading your content so you don't have to do it on the fly. So the next section here is automation. And if you're not planning to automate your webinars, don't worry about this section. This really is only for automated webinars. But if you are planning to automate your webinars, this is the section that you can really schedule out and customize your automated webinar. So let's just kind of take a look at how to set up an automated webinar. First of all, you'll want to make sure that automation is on. Now, once it's on, you'll be able to trigger new auto events just by clicking this new auto event button. And you'll see on the pop-up here that you can, trigger a video or a chat message or a poll, a handout, or an offer code, and you'll be able to schedule these out. So, for example, if I want to trigger a chat, I can click Send a Chat. And then from here, a drawer will slide out asking me when I want to send the chat, the title of the message, and then, of course, the message text that you want to send. When you schedule that out, you just click Save, and that'll just go in this timeline here, and you can just, again, program all of your events out by just continuously clicking this new auto event, adding all of your events, and then you can even add a exit URL so that when you end your webinar, it will redirect to that link. So again, the automated webinar format really puts your webinar on full autopilot. You can certainly still go into your live webinar if you so choose. It's up to you. But but this really just does the work for you. Again, if you're not planning to use the automated webinar format, don't worry. Just make sure that this automation is off and you don't have to think about it. The final section here is the integration section, and that's really going to allow you to integrate with your favorite tools and BigMarker. So for example, if you want to use our HubSpot integration or maybe MailChimp or Salesforce or any of the integrations that you see here, you can really just send and receive email lists to and from BigMarker and your favorite CRM or mail tool here. Now, if you want to use a integration that's not listed here, we also offer a Zapier integration to allow you to integrate with nearly any tool on the web. You just need a Zapier account to do so. So now that we've covered the full kind of webinar setup, let's actually go now into the live webinar format and just kind of take a look around, both from the host perspective and then of course the attendees perspective as well. So as a host, you can actually enter your webinar 1 hour before the scheduled start time. And once you get in the webinar room, this is the blank state that you'll see as a host. Now this does look different than it will for your attendees or your audience members. So let's just kind of break that down really quickly. And to kind of illustrate that, I'm going to pull up a slideshow, some preloaded content that I already have, just to kind of give you a sense and zoom in here, because the only two parts of the webinar experience that your attendees will see is whatever content you're sharing here on the presentation screen. So that could mean any slideshows, any videos, again, YouTube or MP4. If you're screen sharing, if you're sharing a webcam, that'll also display here, or any combination of that. And beyond that, they'll also have access to this chat panel here, which allows them to use the public or private chat. You have the Q&A functions, polls, and also handouts as well. And again, these are the only two aspects of the webinar room that your audience will see. What they won't see, but what you have access to as a host, is the sharing toolbar here at the top right-hand corner of the screen, which will allow you to share a microphone, webcam if you so choose, a screen. So screen sharing is kind of like what I'm doing right now, where you're seeing my browser and my mouse movement in real time. And then also, all of that content that you could have preloaded is available and ready and waiting for you in these slides, videos, and offers sections. So if you're planning to share that content during your webinar, you can, of course, again, open that section, open your file, and you're good to go. Now, the final piece here is the host control panel, and this is really what allows you to control your webinar. Now, the first tab here is the audience tab, and this is going to kind of be the primary controls over your webinar. So you'll see in the kind of first part here, the audience permissions section, you have the first 4 toggles that are auto turned on at the scheduled start time, and the 2 that are auto turned off. Now, the first 4 here are going to really manage this chat panel. So do you want to show your attendee list? Do you want to allow your attendees to see who else is attending the webinar, or how many people are attending? If the answer is no, simply turn that off. Same with public chat and Q&A. So if you want to disable your attendees' abilities to be able to use the public chat or the Q&A features, you can just disable those entirely. Also, if you want to keep your Q&A on, but you want to hide the questions from your attendees, you just want questions to be submitted almost like just to your hosts or to the attendees, or excuse me, to your guest presenters, then you just keep that on and turn off View Q&A and you're good to go. So again, all 4 of these are going to be auto-enabled at the scheduled start time. What's going to be disabled by default is the ability to allow your attendees to be able to share a microphone or a webcam. Now, to enable these for all attendees, you can just turn these on. Again, use these with discretion. These are more of a meeting tool than they are a webinar tool. But if you do want to allow all attendees to be able to share a microphone or webcam, you can enable these. But if you don't, you can keep these off. But let's say that you do want to allow certain attendees to be able to share a mic or a webcam without giving all attendees access. You can keep those off, and then in the individual permissions listed below here, you just find that attendee's name in the attendee list, and just as my name is listed out here with these icons next to my name, you can enable them for single attendees rather than giving everyone access. So you do have quite a bit of control here in this audience section. The only other sections really to note here are the recording section. This is how you record your webinar. You just click on the recording tab and click Start Recording. If you plan to have an automated webinar, all of your automations will be listed out here. And also, of course, the advanced settings as well. So you'll be able to actually see, if you want to broadcast in HD, or if you enabled Twitter and you want to hide tweets, all of that kind of fun stuff. But for the most part, all of your true kind of webinar settings will be in this audience tab here. So we've really covered a lot of ground today. We've covered the channel, the webinar setup and scheduling process, and then of course the hosting experience as well. I'm now going to open the floor to questions. So thank you again for attending and happy hosting.